Over the years, my anxieties have shifted. So at various times, I've been afraid of thunderstorms, fear of flying, moles on my back that I can feel but not see and don't know if they're morphing, large winged insects, serial killers at my cottage, avian flu pandemic. I actually bought $500 worth of freeze-dried food and put it in my basement 2 years ago to protect against avian flu. And abrupt climate change. That's a big and continuing one for me. And right now, Revenue Canada bills. Now, I did not consider myself an anxious child or a teenager. It didn't occur to me that I was anxious. Most children are afraid of the dark. Human beings have a startle reflex that's potentiated by darkness, the way rodents are fearful in the daytime. So it's actually quite natural, so that didn't occur to me. I had no particular sense that I was anxious, although anxiety is about 40% heritable, so I was obviously wired that way, but I didn't contextualize it as anxiety for a very long time. I certainly had a lot of normal anxiety, and what's the difference there? The difference there is that a normal anxiety is what Freud called anxious readiness, which is essentially the way that we would brace for taking our first jump off the cliff, the way, preparing for a test, being here speaking to you, any of those kinds of situations that focus our attention, that raise our adrenaline levels and so forth. And of course that's normal. It's what Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher, called the alarming possibility of being able, of realizing that you might actually be able to do this. That's normal anxiety. As a child, I also sometimes felt true fear, which differs from anxiety in that it is a direct response to something you can run away from. It's an actionable experience, right? So why is anxiety so paralyzing for those of us who experience it? And the reason essentially is because the threat is uncertain. So you're responding to a menace that you don't know what direction you're supposed to be going in to flee the fearful thing. And of course, there's a whole number of theories and speculations about why this is, from Freud and sort of repressed libido to your serotonin levels and so on and all in between. I talk about some of them in my book, but the bottom line is that it can be very, very paralyzing because you're crouched over because what's that noise? And you're sensing a threat in the environment, and you're responding, but you don't know what it is or where it's coming from, and so you can basically be crouched over for 6 months. Studies done at the lab in Columbia University by a neuropsychiatrist named René Hahn, what he does is he knocks out the gene in mice that mediates their fear circuitry, and then he puts them in their mazes. And they can't decide where to go in the maze because they can't figure out what direction is threatening and what direction is safe. So it's actually the ambiguity of the situation that undoes them. And that's very similar in anxiety. So times like now, which are so incredibly uncertain in terms of the economy and so on, is just the death knell for anxious people. They just can't stand it. They've done a study at the University of Toronto they released a couple weeks ago that showed that anxious people would prefer bad news to uncertain news.